Nen, well known as one of the most complicated power systems to ever exist in anime. A power system that's not only calculatable through the amount of aura that somebody's able to hold on to, but a power system that can be broken down in multiple different ways to figure out who's good at what. See, whether somebody's good at Gyo, En, Ren, Ten, Sho, whether they're a conjurer, an enhancer, a specialist, a transmuter, or whether or not they take risks while they activate their own Nen techniques, all come into play when trying to figure out just how powerful a certain Nen user is. So with all that in mind, it seems as though there is no certain way to figure out exactly how powerful somebody can be as a Nen user, right? Well, kind of. See, because while myriad of factors do go into calculating exactly how strong somebody is as a Nen user, some Nen users just inherently have advantages over others. And it all has to do with what category of Nen user they are. See, while we've seen incredible Nen users in every single one of the Nen categories, be that Enhancement, Transmutation, Emission, Conjuration, Manipulation, or Specialization, when it comes down to it, these Nen categories are not made equally. Sure, any genius can acquire a ridiculous amount of power with any single one of these Nen techniques, but when it comes down to it, some people just have easier paths into ultimate power because of the Nen category they fall into. And thus today, I want to go over all these Nen categories and break down to you the strengths and weaknesses of every single one of these Nen categories in comparison to each other. And thus today, I hope to put to bed the conversation of what the truly greatest Nen categories are, because today we're talking all Nen categories in Hunter x Hunter, ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video a week, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We are still in the Forest of Death. It's a long arc. I didn't remember there being all that much after Sasuke broke Zaku's arms, but apparently there's a couple episodes. So, out of the 6 Nen categories that you can fall into, which is the best and which is the worst? Well, let's start with the worst and work our way up to the best. And thus, coming in at number 6 and in last place on this list, we have Conjuration. Oh, but Nick Kurapika's a conjurer, and he's literally the main character of the story and one of the strongest people in Hunter x Hunter, and you're right, but Kurapika's only really powerful because he gets to be a specialist really whenever he wants to be. Well, obviously his finger chains do have a litany of incredible abilities, like being able to immediately find the location of whatever he's looking for by holding one of his chains over a map, figure out if somebody's lying by holding that very same chain in front of them, heal his wounds like a broken arm with his own pinky chain, plunge a chain into the hearts of people as strong as Crollo to make them swear they'll never use Nen again, or even force people like Uvagin into Zetsu. The only reason that any of these chains are nearly as powerful as they are for Kurapika is because A, he made a Nen restriction that stated that he would only use a couple of his chains on members of the Phantom Troop, and B, because Kurapika is able to turn himself into a specialist whenever his eyes are turned crimson, something that he can now do on demand. And as a specialist, Kurapika is able to use all 6 Nen categories at 100% of his potential. Not 100% power, but 100% of his potential. It's complicated. There's math. I'm not going to get into it. But what is the Conjuration Nen type, and why do I believe it to be the weakest out of all of the Nen types? Well, somebody is considered a conjurer if when they do the water divination test, impurities appear in the water. Now, this only happens to about 15% of people, as only 15% of Nen users are conjurers. Now, conjuration as a Nen principle involves creating physical and independent material away from one's body. That is to say that it separates itself from transmutation in the fact that something is made as opposed to Nen being given properties. However, conjuration can get a bit more metaphysical. In chapter 374, when one of the rooms on the Black Whale, room 1013, was transported with all the people inside of it to some other space that nobody was able to gain access to, that emitters are able to move physical spaces, and conjurers are able to make spaces with certain laws. Laws like only X, Y, and Z person can enter this room, or if somebody leaves this room, the door will change and they'll never be able to find it again. And this ties hand in hand with the fact that conjurers are also able to generate things like pocket dimensions. Now, obviously, generating these more metaphysical things is much more difficult and requires a much higher level conjurer, because if a conjurer wants to be able to make something, they have to be able to visualize the thing they want to make. If they can visualize a water bottle, they can make a water bottle. But visualizing a pocket dimension or a metaphysical space that you control the laws of is much more difficult. However, when it comes down to it, that's basically the only good usage of conjuration, these metaphysical conjurations, because it's a well-known fact that was told to us when Kurapika was trying to learn how to use Conjuration Nen, that the quality and the toughness of the thing that you're able to conjure is usually a good metric of how good the conjurer in question is. And almost every single time, the thing conjured isn't actually going to be as good as the thing it's being modeled after. A conjured knife won't be as sharp, a conjured shield won't be as sturdy, and so on and so forth. However, where conjurers are able to get full utility of the things that they do conjure is that some of them have the ability to alter the length and size of the items they conjure. And therefore, the hypothetical circumstance where I'm swinging a knife at you and you're going to dodge it, I would be able to increase the reach of my blade by extending it with my conjuration net. This is best put on display with Kurapika, who is constantly generating additional lengths to his chains to increase their range. I mean, he's not just walking around with 30 yards of chain around his arm at all points. His chains fit perfectly onto his hand, but when he needs to cast them, they are extended. However, there are a lot of limits to the things that are conjured. See, as nothing can be conjured that would be able to complete something beyond human capacity, like a sword that can cut through anything, or a shield that can block any attack. These can't be made because they go beyond the bounds of what humans can accomplish. However, Nen restrictions can be applied to conjured items to make them do some insane stuff, like Shizuku's Blinky. Blinky is a vacuum, conjured by Shizuku, a member of the Phantom Troop, and Blinky is able to suck up literally anything, infinitely, so long as that thing is not alive or made out of Nen. So when it comes to dead bodies or inanimate objects, Blinky could suck up the entire world. And these are the kind of Nen restrictions that conjurers unfortunately have to go through if they want to make their conjured items even remotely useful. Kurapika's binding chain is bound with a Nen restriction that says he'll only use it against members of the Phantom Troop, and if he breaks that rule, he'll die. However, the resulting power of this Nen restriction is that Kurapika's binding chain is so powerful that it not only is able to bind Uvagin, but also force him into Zetsu. So while there is absolutely ways for conjurers to become powerful Nen users, unfortunately it's a Nen category that forces you more down the path of being a supporter. But hey, if you're willing to shave down your life force to become a specialist whenever you really want to, then I guess you have other options. But at least conjurers have the chance to be good people, unlike the Nen users from our number 5 spot, Manipulation. There's only 2 manipulators who are notably good people, and that's Moral and Zushi. Everyone else is either a Zoldyck, a member of the Phantom Troop, or both. Now, fortunately for us, Manipulation is as rare as Conjuration is, with only 15% of Nen users being manipulators. And manipulators are identified if they're able to move the leaf on top of the water divination test. Now, manipulators are exactly what they sound like. Their Nen abilities allow for them to control living and non-living things, whether that be people, objects, or in the case of people like Moral, Nen constructs. However, usually when it comes down to manipulator, it feels as though they're almost always controlling living people. Whether that's Shalnark using his Nen cell phone to control individuals like the Mafia members to blow each other away, or slipping one of his own control nodes into himself to overclock his body and essentially put him in Super Saiyan mode, or Illumi creating entire legions of needle people to hunt down specific targets, there's a reason that manipulators are actually one of the most feared types of Nen users in the Hunter x Hunter universe. Because while other kinds of Nen users like enhancers, conjurers, emitters, transmuters have to beat you the fair and square way, once manipulators are able to achieve a certain set of criteria, like, oh, I don't know, getting 1 or 2 needles in your skull, the fight is over. And the reason that manipulation techniques work this way is because manipulators are actually the Nen users who are able to pour the most aura into objects. Not to keep using my water bottle here, but if I was a manipulator, I'd be able to pour more Nen into this water bottle than any other kind of Nen user. Now, because of that, if, I don't know, there was a sharp end to the end of this water bottle, if I was to insert that water bottle into you, I'd be able to fill your body with the most of my Nen possible. And that's how manipulation techniques work in the Hunter x Hunter universe. It is a melding of the user's Nen with somebody else's. Now, what's truly terrifying about manipulators is that they're almost always able to control the people that they're manipulating from a far distance. And while controlling your Nen from a far distance is usually something that's limited to emitters, because manipulators, like Shalnark with the cell phone, often use a medium to control the Nen that they inject into other people from a distance, they actually don't have to have any kind of specialization in Emission. But not all manipulators are made the same. Even if just talking about the 2 most prominent manipulators, those being Shalnark and Illumi, while the techniques may seem to operate in very similar ways, they both serve as an incredible way to show the differences in how certain manipulators go about manipulating people or things. See, Shalnark can't control nearly as many people as Illumi, and this is because Shalnark has substantially less control needles than Illumi. However, Shalnark has much better control over the people that he is able to manipulate because he can control them like a video game. Now, while Illumi is able to take over somebody simply by placing 1 needle in their skull, that person kind of becomes a mindless automaton. However, if Illumi places dozens of needles in somebody's skull, they're able to conduct relatively complicated tasks like driving a car. And therefore, all of this boils down to, like with a lot of things in the Nen world, risk. The more risk that a manipulator has to undergo in order to take somebody under their control, the better the control they'll have of that person or thing. And not all manipulation techniques look exactly like somebody becoming a zombie controlled by somebody else. While yes, there is manipulation techniques like Shalnark that allow Shalnark to take complete and total control over somebody's body, there's also manipulation techniques like Saleh Saleh, one of the Kakin Empire princes, Guardian Spirit Beast, that allowed for him to manipulate the emotions of how certain people felt about him if they breathed in essentially diffused germs that were being spat out by this Guardian Spirit Beast. And that's the thing, manipulation exists as a range. It can be complete control, it can be semi-control, or it can just be manipulating your emotions to make you feel like you like the person that's manipulating you a little bit more than you used to. But it's also important to remember that any Nen construct that's controlled in any capacity whatsoever, whether that be Pito's Terpsichora or Moral's Deep Purple, is also a manipulation ability, as they're manipulating their Nen to take physical form and do the things that they want them to do. But Nick, if you're saying that Nen users in the manipulation category are feared by all of the Nen users, then why is it at number 5 on this list? Well, while we have seen ridiculously powerful manipulators like Pito and Delumi, there are some pretty simple workarounds to fighting against the manipulator, like the fact that you can't manipulate somebody who's already being manipulated. And therefore, if you can allow yourself to be manipulated by somebody on your side, or if you yourself are already a manipulator, you can pretty much invalidate the entire kit of a manipulator just like that. On top of that, the manipulation Nen category inherently lends itself better towards things like scouting than it does offensive output. On top of that, a lot of the very best manipulator techniques would be completely useless without our next Nen category, Emission, coming in at number 4. Now, emitters are some of the most common Nen users in all of Hunter x Hunter, making up 24% of the Nen using population. And when it comes to offensive output, some of the strongest characters in Hunter x Hunter fall under the categorization of emitter. Now, an emitter is identified if they're able to change the color of the water during the water divination test, which is the one result of the water divination test that I've never necessarily understood. See, emission is what happens when an Nen user is able to separate their Nen from their body. As to why that would change the color of the water, I can't really say. However, since emission is focused on being able to separate Nen from your body, usually emitters are long-range specialists, either through the means of firing off gigantic aura balls at your opponents from a distance, or by being able to maintain a technique that they created earlier from a distance. See, that's the thing that a lot of fans of Hunter x Hunter don't necessarily understand. Well, yes, it's easy to understand that when people like Razor create a ball out of Nen and throw it at somebody, that is emission. Any Nen technique that's maintained from a distance is an emission Nen technique. And all emission Nen techniques are inherently very difficult, because usually for non-emitters, the second that Nen is separated from somebody's body, it dissipates very quickly. However, high-level emitters, and this is usually the sign of how good an emitter is, are able to separate mass amounts of aura from their body and not only maintain it for a long time, but also from a long distance. But emission can do so much more than even that. See, emission is probably number 1 of all of the Nen categories, outside of probably specialists, in terms of, oh, didn't think it would be able to do that. See, because with the most uncomplicated versions of emission are Razor or Silva Zoldyck making massive balls of aura that they're gonna throw at opponents to completely decimate them. I've also seen people like Zeno Zoldyck create entire aura dragons that they can use to carry Meruem and Netero kilometers away from their original location to some place that they'll be able to fight to their heart's content. And thus, in moments like that, and through Gon's Jaja Ken Paper Blast, that emission can also be used to propel oneself. But it doesn't stop there, because emission techniques can also allow for one to teleport themselves, as we saw from Princes Fugetsu and Kacho, who had the ability to create a tunnel network of doors that allowed for them to teleport themselves all across the Black Whale. We've also seen from people like Kurapika and Jing and Prince Halkenberg that emission allows for you to phase through non-living matter. And Melody has shown the ability, by combining her emission Nen with her music, that she can relieve fatigue of those listening and even transfix those who are listening into some kind of hypnotic state. And if emission users are also talented manipulators like Moral, they can generate Nen constructs that they're able to control from miles away at a high level. So while some of the most famous emitters that we know about are people like Franklin or Zeno Zoldyck or even Silva Zoldyck, who tend to just make orbs of aura and blow people away with them, there's an insane amount of versatility in the emission Nen category that allows for a lot of offensive output, and thus it gets our number 4 spot. But in account of the fact that Nen, regardless of the fact of whether or not you are an emitter, it's weaker and harder to control the further it is from your body, I will forever and always believe that transmutation Transmutation Nen is greater than Emission Nen, which is why Transmutation is getting our number 3 spot. Transmutation Nen users are kind of middle of the pack when it comes to rarities, as 19% of Nen users end up being Transmutation Nen users. Now, transmuters are identified if they are, during the water divination test, able to change the flavor of the water. And this makes sense to me because transmutation type Nen users alter their Nen to have specific properties. Now, as to what these properties are, that's basically up to the transmuter. Users can have their Nen take on the properties of something natural, like lightning, something man-made, like rubber and gum, simultaneously, or even take on animalistic properties. But it's not necessarily that their aura has to take on some kind of property, as Machi, who's a transmuter, is able to transmute her Nen into that of strings, allowing her to use her Nen to conduct surgeries, reconnecting people's lost limbs, veins, muscles, all of that. And while transmutation may not have the additive bonus of being able to be thrown like Emission type techniques, pretty much every single transmuter we've ever seen in Hunter x Hunter has been substantially stronger than most Nen users. Whether that's Killua with his Godspeed, the multiple applications of Hisoka's bungee gum, or Yubi's ability to transmute his Nen into explosive energy, transmission allows for a level of creativity with your Nen that a lot of other Nen categories don't afford. And as transmuted Nen, like all Nen outside of conjured Nen, is invisible to the naked eye, the amount of versatility afforded by something like bungee gum or even Machi's Nen threads is nearly infinite, and thus on account of the fact that transmuters just simply appear to be stronger than most other Nen users, whether that's through being able to reflect fired coins back at the user or by being able to override your own brain's electrical circuits to move faster. Transmuters get the number 3 spot. But turning your Nen into something like bungee gum or lightning is somehow less practical and less effective in the Hunter x Hunter universe than turning your Nen into just bigger muscles. Because coming up at our number 2 spot, yes, ahead of transmutation, is enhancement. Now, fortunately for enhancers, they are the most common category of Nen user, with 27% of Nen users falling under the categorization of enhancers. And considering the fact that in Hunter x Hunter, it is a common belief that enhancers usually don't need special techniques, as their natural category, enhancement, already has the best blend of offensive and defensive capability, which allows for people like Gon and Uvagin to simply focus on making their punches hit harder. See, an enhancer is identified if, while doing the water divination test, they increase the amount of water. And while that kind of makes sense to me, it also flies in the face of all physics. See, enhancement is incredibly straightforward, and therefore the people who use it tend to be incredibly straightforward. It is simply the practice of using your Nen to augment and increase your own body's abilities. Whether that's Dogman being able to sniff out whether somebody's a Nen user and what kind of Nen user they are, Uvagin turning his right jab into that of a ballistic missile, Komogi increasing her ability to play Go, or Goto increasing his ability to flick coins. Enhancers are greatly able to increase their own attack or defensive ability, and are therefore the best suited out of any of the Nen users for physical combat. And the limits that an enhancer is able to achieve in terms of physical strength is really only limited by how hard they work on themselves. Because while all Nen users are basically immune to things like bullets, an enhancer who works on their Nen and their body can make their body more durable than that of a tank. On top of this, as enhancement exists at the top of the Nen categories chart, enhancers actually have the most balanced mix of aptitudes for other Nen categories, being 100% efficient in enhancement Nen techniques, 80% efficient in emission and transmutation techniques, and 60% efficient and manipulation in conjuration techniques, with 0% proficiency in specialization techniques, but everybody is 0% proficient in specialization techniques outside of specialists. And therefore they are the only Nen category that is not 40% efficient in one of the other Nen categories, meaning that natural born enhancers are actually given the greatest versatility in exploring other Nen categories outside of their original. However, very few enhancers actually take advantage of this, as most of them are usually dedicated to just trying to amp one of the basic tenets of Nen, be that Gyo, Ten, Ren, Sho, something like that. Gon's Cha-Cha Ken, one of the most famous Nen techniques in all of Hunter x Hunter, is just a high-level application of Ryu, as Gon simply coats his fist in a ton of aura and then explodes that aura into whoever he punches. Well, it's actually closer to Ko, but still. And thus, for being the most well-rounded out of all of the Nen categories, yes, enhancers get our number 2 spot, which leaves space for only, very obviously, our number 1 one spot, which is specialization. Listen, there's a reason that only 0.033% of Nen users are specialists. That's because usually if somebody is a specialist, they're broken in some way or another. See, the only way to identify if somebody is a specialist is if, while doing the water divination test, the water and or the leaf does something that wasn't previously listed as one of the other categories. Tessier Niche, when he did the water divination test, turned the water into a corrosive acid-like substance. Pizzo, when they did the water divination test, made the leaf crumple and wither away. Basically, whatever happens to the water or the leaf is kind of indicative of whatever special stability you have. And therefore, there's really no parameters to explain what a specialist is in the Hunter x Hunter universe. They are simply Nen users that fall out of the categorization of the other 5 Nen categories. On top of this, technically, they are the most well-rounded Nen users in all of Hunter x Hunter. See, because specialists are able to use every different kind of Nen category at 100% efficiency and power. There is no fall off in terms of their ability to use other Nen categories depending on how far they are away from specialization. Specialists aren't able to only access 40% of enhancement abilities. Now, this is mostly because none of the rules of Nen apply to specialists. They can combine multiple Nen types, including those that exist on opposite ends of the chart from each other, like Manipulation and Transmutation, into a new singular ability, or they can just make abilities that don't necessarily fall into the purview of any of the Nen categories, like Neon's future telling ability. That allows for her to tell somebody what happened in their past, what's happening in their present, and what's going to happen in their future. An ability that might be a transmutation ability, might be an enhancement ability. It really doesn't fall under any of the Nen categories cleanly. Like, is Neon amping her predictive ability using enhancement Nen, manipulating the universe to tell her what the future events are going to be using manipulation Nen? We genuinely can't say, and that's why it's a specialist ability. On top of this, we have absolutely no way how specialist Nen users develop their specific Nen techniques. We know that Neon got her future telling ability because she had wished for something like that since she was a child. Tessier Niche got his time rewrite ability simply by being awoken to Nen, and probably something to do with his spirit guardian beast. And Crollo probably got his ability to steal other people's Nen abilities because he was leading a troop of assassins slash thieves since he was like 12 years old. Therefore, it seems as though that specialists, unlike all other Nen users, awaken to their Nen abilities as opposed to training for them. But Nick, if specialization Nen can't be used by other Nen categories, and specialists are able to use all of the Nen categories at whatever percentage of efficiency they want to, then why is it even put on the Nen wheel in the first place? Well, because you can technically become a specialist later in life. When you're awoken to Nen, you don't necessarily have to be a specialist at that moment in time to eventually awaken specialization skills. However, this really only happens for manipulators and conjurers, and therefore specialization was put next to the two of them to show the likelihood of manipulators and conjurers to awaken to specialization Nen. This is why Karapika, who is a conjurer, was able to awaken to specialization techniques by activating his crimson eyes. So on account of the fact that specialization techniques have never been shown as anything but disgustingly broken, whether that's Neon Nestrad being able to tell the future of anybody that she sees a photo of, Karapika being able to steal and gift out Nen techniques to other people using his scarlet eyes and Pinky Dolphin, Alakazoldik being able to channel eye and quite literally grant wishes, or Tessier Niche being able to see into the future and alter it. If somebody's a specialist, you can bet your bottom dollar they're one of the most broken people in Hunter x Hunter. And therefore, yes, obviously, it's the most powerful out of any of the Nen categories. At least that's what I think, but I'm curious to hear from you guys. Out of all of the Nen categories, which do you believe is the most powerful and which is the least? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go get this mop cut. My hair is so long.